Hello and welcome. This is Barrett from the C4 Cyber Club here at Cypress College. In this video today, we're going to cover the Ethical Hacking Lab series for Metasploit Framework and Armitage, which is essentially a GUI version of Metasploit's framework. So what is Metasploit? Always important to know which tools you're about to dive into. So this is an open source exploitation framework. It's owned by Rapid7. There's a free version, which generally comes packaged with Kali Linux distribution. And there is also a pro paid version that they offer as well. The cool thing about Metasploit is how modular it is. So this allows you to combine various exploits with any other payload. And these modules can also relate to pre-exploitation or even post-exploitation. So it's a really good way to do privilege escalation. You find yourself in a computer that's maybe a standard user and you're looking to get root privileges. So there's ways to, migrate throughout running processes and things like that through these modular components. So to put this all into context, we've gone over labs related to reconnaissance and information gathering, doing Nmap for port scanning and service detection, OS fingerprinting. This is the point where we take all of that information and then we use that to craft our exploits in Metasploit. So once we know what type of vulnerabilities there are, this is the tool that we need to actually move forward with those exploits. So let's go ahead and get into it. This is always a very popular tool for those interested in security. So first thing we need to do is just start up a couple services, because especially using Armitage, and we're going to need access to the database. So we'll just run a couple command lines here, starting up the database, and then we will also need to start up PostgreSQL. Okay, so service PostgreSQL start. Okay, now we're good to go. So essentially, to launch Metasploit, we could type msf console from the command line. And you can see it is starting up now. So you're always greeted with a different banner. You could have some fun with this and type in banner, and it's going to randomize the banner each time. That one we already got. Let's try for one more. Okay. So good ASCII art, right? We can also very first just get help. Always a good idea to go through the help files, get familiar with some of the commands. If you scroll all the way up, here you see it's broken into core commands, module-specific commands, job commands, resource script commands, etc. Database backend commands as well. There's a way to run Nmap, within Metasploit, and then it logs everything that you're scanning within its own database. So that's very useful. Yeah, so that's definitely a great resource as you start to learn Metasploit. And the lab is pointing out that we can also run standard Linux commands like ifconfig, for example. So we can get our network adapter information straight away within the Metasploit prompt. And we could even use tools like netcat. So let's say we'll try connecting to the OWASP BWA machine on port 80 through netcat. And you could see that we are connected. If I type help, yeah, I thought this might dump like kind of a banner. It's trying to make a request but we don't really get much out of that. So that's okay. It's not the overall purpose of this lab. So we can show all modules. So remember I was talking about how Metasploit is very modular by design. So if we type show all, now this is going to take a moment to populate. I could start scrolling through some of these things here. So these are encoders. I'm going to give it a moment to start loading all of the various exploits and payloads. Yep, so there we go. You'll start to find this quite a lot to start scrolling through. But as you can see, we have thousands and thousands of exploits here. And they're going to be broken up. You can see some are for Linux, some are for Windows. So it's all going to depend on your initial reconnaissance, right? Are you trying to exploit a Windows machine, a Linux machine? What type of services are they running? And you notice how here's an example where this section is listed as post. The one above this is probably just listed as exploit, but post, for example, would be after you've gained a foothold on a system and you want to potentially do lateral movement, privilege escalation. You can run post exploits to further strengthen your foothold on that system. So that is show all. Now you can also run show exploits and show payloads. We essentially got all that information here. So I'm not gonna run that again, but I do encourage you to go through all of the different exploits and payloads and see what's available. And another thing is, let's say if you know a specific area that you want to look for. Let's say we wanted to see possible exploits for Apache web server, for example. So we could say search Apache, and this is going to pull up everything related to Apache web server. So there are lots of various ways to focus in on certain areas that you're looking for. Okay, now we can also load a vulnerability scanner within Metasploit. So we could use WMAP, which is essentially a web application vulnerability scanner. So we say load WMAP. Okay, so this is a loaded plugin. And if we get help in here, you'll notice that we'll get a lot of the same help information from our original request at the main menu. But if you scroll all the way up at the top, this is where you're going to see specific WMAP help commands. And if we wanted to get more detailed help on a very specific command, so let's say WMAP _sites-h for help, this is going to give us all the different options that we have for this particular command. Okay, so we want to add a site. We want to scan, excuse me, this OWASP broken web application. So we know that this is hosting a web application at 192.168.68.12, and we want to scan that. So we come back to Kali, we could say WMAP _sites-a for add site, and we'll say HTTP and then the IP address. Okay, so site created. We've added that into the database, and we can confirm by listing which sites are currently configured. Okay, and now we're going to set a very specific target at this location. And if we could actually go to that in a browser, just so you can see what it looks like. Utility index.php. Okay, so at first glance, this looks like it could be a vulnerable site. It looks pretty old, right? So this is essentially what we're going to be targeting. So let me come back to, I'll go ahead and minimize that so it's not too distracting. So let's set the target, -t, enter in that URL. Okay, we can, once again, we can confirm that with the -l. Okay, so we have the IP address, port 80. It is not using SSL. And then this is the path, right? That's the full path of the web app. Okay, view the options available when attempting to scan a target. So wmap_run, let's get help on that. So we could see this -t option, we could show all enabled modules. So we could see what's available for us to scan. And what this is going to do, it's testing this target, and then it's going to display, or I'm sorry, not display, but well, it does display. It gives us a list of all the various modules that we can use. And it's also going to, so 39 wmap enable modules loaded, and it's going to place it in a file. And this is located in, we can cat this out from our location here. So cat /root/profile. So this is, remember, this is an absolute path. Our root directory in profile, or I'm sorry, the profile is the name of the file. And we notice it's listed all of the various modules that we could scan with. And so now when we get to the final command to run this scanner, we are saying with this -e, and remember, if we get help, we're saying with the -e, launch profile modules against all matched targets. So it's going to be the targets within the profile that was just created. Okay, so if we do wmap-run -e, the location of the target file, now it's going to actually do the scan using those particular modules, right? So this is going to take 1 to 2 minutes. Maybe not, 10 seconds. So you could see all of the various scans that were done, and we could view the vulnerabilities by saying wmap_vulns-l. And so we don't get a whole lot, but we do see this file svn entry found. That's a pretty significant vulnerability. Essentially, this is created by the Subversion version control system. It's a form of metadata. So this contains a list of files and directories under version control. So this is a pretty significant information leak, because if an attacker can get to this, they may find hidden files and hidden directories within the web root. So yeah, definitely a pretty significant vulnerability there. So let's continue on. Let's see what else we can target here within Metasploit. So let's say we did some Nmap scans and we found a potentially outdated version of TikiWiki. So this is a content management system, also built around, essentially it's a web app as well, right? So we could, remember, like I did earlier, we search for Apache exploits, but now we're going to search for TikiWiki. And the lab is recommending that we use the TikiWiki graph formula exec exploit here. So this is going to allow for remote PHP code execution, which, that sounds like something we could probably get shell access from, right? So we can get info about a particular exploit before we actually move on to use it. Whoops. You can use the tab key, much like you can in regular Linux command line also, to complete lines. So that's a tip. So you see, as we display info, I'm going to scroll up a bit. It's okay, platform is PHP. Here's the module name. Here's the disclosure date. So this was back in 2007. You'd be surprised at sometimes how far back systems may be vulnerable for very old disclosed CVEs just because they don't update, This shows you the different options that need to be set. So something we'll definitely look at is our hosts. We need to set that to our victim machine. And it gives a description. So it contains a flaw that may allow a remote attacker to execute arbitrary PHP code. The issue is due to a script not properly sanitizing user input. So that's a big issue, especially with web apps. Input validation is very important to protect against various vulnerabilities. So we've got the info. Now we've decided, yes, this is what I want to use. So we type in use exploit Unix. Whoops, my keyboard was going crazy there for a second. Okay, web app, TikiWiki, graph. I'm going to hit the tab key to complete that. Okay, so now you notice the command prompt has changed. We are interfacing with this exploit essentially. First thing I would always recommend doing is show options. And this is showing you all the different settings that you could potentially make. And this one's fairly straightforward. All we need to do is set the remote target for the exploit. Remember, this is going to be the IP address of the OWASP BWA machine. So we set our hosts 192.168.68.12. And it's as easy as that. And although actually, no, I shouldn't say that. We are going to go a step further and add a very specific payload. So, and this is specific to PHP. And what we're going to be doing is gaining access through a Meterpreter shell, which is kind of like an upgraded Metasploit shell. This is going to give you a lot more options than just the standard command line shell. And you can see that this is working through reverse TCP. Essentially what we're doing is when we are able to exploit this vulnerability, we cause the other machine to connect back to us. So that's what's referred to as a reverse TCP. We're the listener. We're listening on a certain port number, and the victim machine will actively connect to us, which is really good tactic, often used to bypass firewalls, because a lot of firewalls aren't so concerned about what's going out of their network. They're trying to block what's coming in. So this is where reverse TCP payloads come in handy. So let's go ahead and set that payload. We can show options here. And now this is the most important part. We need to set the L host to our IP address. So that is the IP of our Kali machine, 192.168.9.2. And now, finally, we can exploit. All right, and we see Meterpreter session 1 opened. The lab kind of ends it there, but from here we can get help. You see various things that you could run here. We could say a GUID, get a session ID, but it looks like this. Oh, and session is closed. I actually noticed this another time I was running. This particular exploit is not perfect every time you run it. You could potentially try running it a couple times. Let me try exploiting again. And this is actually kind of common. Not all exploits are going to run perfectly, because a lot of times you're doing some real, brute force attacks on systems, and exploits could potentially crash a system, causing a total denial of service, right? So this is where the kind of hacking art form comes into play, where you have to see, yeah, this one's. I think we're gonna have more luck when we switch over to using Armitage. So I'm gonna leave it at this for now and continue on. But anyways, what I was saying, the sort of art form of hacking is there's many different ways to do this, and not all vulnerabilities are going to work like you think that they might. Every system you potentially are testing or scanning is going to be different. So it is what it is. So let's go ahead and let's move on. And let's move on to section 4 of the lab, starting Armitage and scanning hosts. Remember, this is essentially a GUI version of Metasploit. So it uses Metasploit as its base, and we're going to see a more graphical interface. So let me exit out of Metasploit, and from the command line, and also I exited just by typing exit-y. It's a quick way to exit. And from the command line, we just type in Armitage. And when the connect comes up here, you just go ahead and press connect. It's connecting to our local interface. And when it asks to create the RPC server, you say yes. Okay. All right. So we're first greeted with a machine here, and you notice that this is the OWASP BWA machine. And the reason why it's in here is because it's accessing the database that we've already been working with in the command line, right? So you could see how this directly integrates in with Metasploit. But let's go ahead and remove this. I'm going to right click, go to host, remove host. There we go. And we're going to do a new scan from scratch. So this is kind of nice. We can go to hosts, nmap scan, and we could do an nmap scan right here within Armitage. So we'll do an intent scan, enter in the OWASP BWA IP address. And you notice that we have a terminal down here running the scan for us. And if I scroll up, you can actually look at the command. So it's running a -T4. It's a fairly quick scan, running -A option. That's known as an aggressive scan. So it's looking for service version detection, OS fingerprinting. It's running a few different scripts, not a few, more, probably hundreds of scripts. And the -V for verbose, that's why we're seeing all of this output here as it scans. So it will probably take about another minute, and you will get a pop-up alerting you that it's complete. Okay, so scan complete, and we've noticed that the host is back in our workspace here. So I'm going to press OK. We can set a label on this. So if we right click, go to host, set label, we can call this OWASP. We notice that updates there. Now we can also find attacks for this. So as long as it's you notice the green selection, we could press that. Attack analysis completes. You will now see an attack menu attached to each host in the targets window. But let's go ahead and let me maximize this a little bit. Let's go ahead and do that same TikiWiki graph formula exploit. Let's see if we have better luck this time within Armitage. Okay, so we go to exploit Unix web app, and then TikiWiki graph. There we go. We just double click, and you notice that this time we do not have to set anything. There we go. It gives you the description. The L host is set. The R host is set. All we do is press launch. And you notice it's basically automating everything for us down here. Okay, command shell session 1 opened. All right, we may be in business. So you notice how the machine here turned red. And if I right click, we see shell 1. Let's go ahead and interact with that. So we get a new tab here. It looks like we're at a shell prompt. Let me do ls for a listing. And sure enough, it looks like we are on that machine. I say GUID, I'm sorry, get no sysinfo. Running processes. Okay, yeah, we can do that. So yeah, at this point, you have a shell access. You know, who am I? We are the www-data user. So we don't have root access, but like I said, there are ways, because Metasploit is modular, there are ways to potentially do these post exploits to potentially do privilege escalation and upgrade your access, but that will come in future labs. But for now, yeah, so that wraps up this lab. We covered the Metasploit framework all within the command line, and then we moved on to Armitage, which is the graphical user interface version of Metasploit. So hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching. See you in the next one.